Before I tell you what happened on my son's wedding day, I need you to understand something. I'm not the kind of mother who interferes. I raised Lysander to be independent, to make his own choices, to live his own life. After my husband Alexander died 3 years ago, I promised myself I'd give our son space to find his own happiness. But that morning, the morning Lysander was supposed to marry Tirza Moore, I woke up with a feeling I couldn't shake. My grandmother used to call it the knowing, that tightness in your chest that tells you something's wrong before your brain catches up. I should have trusted it sooner. If you've ever ignored your instincts because you didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling, stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about protection, sacrifice, and what it really means to be a mother. The dress hanging on my closet door was navy blue. Elegant, understated. The kind of thing a mother wears when she's proud. Alexander had picked it out for me 3 months before he died. "For Lysander's wedding someday," he'd said, holding it up with that smile of his. "Our boy's going to find someone wonderful, Letty, and you're going to look beautiful standing beside him." I reached out to touch the fabric, and my hand trembled. It was 6:30 in the morning, spring sunshine already streaming through the windows of our home in Buckhead. The wedding wasn't until 11, but I'd been awake since 4, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why I felt like I was preparing for a funeral instead of a celebration. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, holding the dress against my body. 58 years old, silver starting to thread through my dark hair, lines around my eyes that hadn't been there when Alexander was alive. I looked like a woman who'd survived grief. I looked like someone who should know better than to trust a perfect smile and rehearsed charm. "Alexander," I whispered to the empty room, "what am I missing?" My husband had been dead for 3 years, but I still talked to him, still asked his advice, still felt his absence like a physical ache. He'd been the one with the instincts, the businessman who could read people in seconds, who knew when a deal was too good to be true, who protected our family with quiet certainty. I missed him most on days like this. I walked to my nightstand and picked up our wedding photo. 27 years old in that picture, glowing with joy. Alexander's hand on my waist, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. We'd built a life together. The Brixton Hotel Group, 3 properties in Atlanta, investments that had secured our family's future for generations. And Lysander, our beautiful, trusting boy, who was about to marry a woman I couldn't read. Tirza Moore had appeared in our lives 18 months ago at a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Lysander had been managing the hotel's event space that night, and I'd watched from across the room as a stunning young woman approached him, champagne glass in hand, smile radiant. "Mom," he'd said later that night, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen since his father died. "I met someone. Her name's Tirza, and she's incredible." And she was. Beautiful, articulate, charming. She said all the right things. She asked about Alexander, expressed sympathy with what seemed like genuine warmth. She fit into our world seamlessly, knew which fork to use, knew how to navigate conversations with our business associates, knew exactly how to make Lysander feel seen and valued. "Too perfect," some small voice had whispered. But I'd ignored it, because Lysander was happy, because after 3 years of watching my son move through life like a ghost, grieving his father and throwing himself into work to avoid the pain, he was finally smiling again. What kind of mother ruins that? I set down the photo and walked to the window. Our estate sprawled below, manicured lawns, the pool where Lysander had learned to swim, the garden where Alexander had proposed to me 31 years ago. The black sedan was already in the driveway. Theo Palmer, our driver. Early, very early. I checked my watch. 6:45. Theo wasn't supposed to arrive until 7:30. We had time. The wedding wasn't until 11, and the cathedral was only 20 minutes away. So why was Theo here? I pulled on my robe and headed downstairs, that feeling in my chest getting tighter with every step. Theo stood beside the car, arms crossed, jaw set. In 15 years of working for our family, I'd never seen Theodore Palmer look nervous. He was a rock, steady, calm, the kind of man Alexander had hired because he could handle anything without breaking a sweat. But this morning, Theo looked like a man carrying a secret that was eating him alive. "Good morning, Mrs. Brixton," he said as I approached, his voice low and urgent. "I apologize for arriving early, but what's wrong?" I cut him off. "Is Lysander all right?" Mr. Lysander is fine. He's still at his apartment, getting ready with Ryan. Theo glanced toward the house, then back to me. Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately. Now, before we pick up Mr. Lysander. The morning air was warm and sweet, birds singing in the trees, everything beautiful and peaceful. But standing there in my robe, watching Theo's face, I felt cold. Tell me, I said. Not here. Theo opened the back door of the sedan. Please, Mrs. Brixton, get in the car. I didn't move. Theo, you're scaring me. I'm sorry, ma'am, but this can't wait, and we can't have this conversation where anyone might overhear. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I recognized from 3 years ago, the night Alexander died, when Theo had been the one to drive me to the hospital, the one who'd held my arm when my knees buckled at the news. Fear. Please, he said quietly. Mr. Alexander made me promise. He said if I ever saw something that could hurt Mr. Lysander, I should tell you first. Let you handle it. Because a mother's instinct is never wrong, I finished, Alexander's words in Theo's mouth making my throat tight. He used to say that. Yes, ma'am, and I've been debating for 3 days whether to tell you what I found. But this morning I realized, if I don't speak up now, I'll never forgive myself. I looked at the house. Lysander was still at his apartment downtown, probably panicking about his vows, checking his tie in the mirror, laughing with Ryan about last-minute wedding jitters. My son, my beautiful, trusting son, who'd already lost his father and was finally ready to start a family of his own. What was I about to learn? I climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled like leather and the lavender air freshener Theo always used. The door closed with a soft click, and suddenly the world felt very small and very quiet. Theo got into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. Instead, he turned to face me, holding an iPad. 3 days ago, he said carefully, I was picking up dry cleaning in Midtown, and I saw her. Saw who? Miss Tirzah, but she wasn't dressed like herself. Jeans, plain t-shirt, hair in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked completely different. My heart started beating faster. So, maybe she was having a casual day. She went into a house on Maple Street, the old neighborhood near Piedmont Park, blue-collar area. Theo's jaw tightened. She was carrying groceries, and when the door opened, a little girl ran out, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Blonde curls. Called her Mommy. The word hit me like a physical blow. Mommy? Yes, ma'am. And then a man appeared, late 30s, casual clothes. He kissed Miss Tirzah, not like a friend, like a husband. I couldn't breathe. You must be mistaken. Tirzah doesn't have children. She told us. I thought the same thing. Theo held up the iPad. So I went back, yesterday and the day before, watched the house, and I took photographs. He handed me the iPad. The first photo showed Tirzah, unmistakably Tirzah, even without makeup and fancy clothes, crouching down to tie a little girl's shoe. The child was laughing, face turned toward the camera. Blonde curls, bright smile. The second photo showed Tirzah and a man loading groceries from a car, his arm around her waist, her leaning into him. The third photo was a close-up of a mailbox, the Hayes family. Hayes, I whispered. Not more. No, ma'am. Theo's voice was gentle but firm. I did some checking. Legal records. Tirzah Quinn Hayes has been married to Jackson Hayes for 6 years. They have 1 daughter, Emma, age 5. The house on Maple Street is in both their names. The iPad trembled in my hands. But that's impossible. Lysander, they've been together for 18 months. She's been to our home dozens of times. We've met her friends, her supposed colleagues from work. She showed us her apartment in Buckhead. How could she? I don't know, Mrs. Brixton, but I know what I saw. And I know that today she's planning to marry Mr. Lysander while she's already legally married to someone else. Bigamy. The word floated through my mind, cold and sharp. Why? My voice came out as a whisper. Why would she do this? What could she possibly gain? Theo was quiet for a moment. With respect, ma'am, the Brixton family is worth quite a lot. The hotels, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolio. If Miss Tirzah became Mrs. Brixton legally, she'd have access to Lysander's inheritance. The pieces clicked into place, making me feel sick. The trust fund Alexander set up, the accounts that become jointly accessible after marriage. Yes, ma'am. I sat back against the leather seat, mind racing. 18 months. 18 months of careful cultivation, of making Lysander fall in love, of winning over his grieving mother, of positioning herself as the perfect daughter-in-law, all leading to this day when she would legally become part of our family and gain access to everything Alexander had built. Mrs. Brixton? Theo's voice was soft. What do you want to do? What did I want to do? Call the police? Confront Tirza? Tell Lysander right now, this minute, that the woman he loved was a fraud? I imagined my son's face when I told him. The devastation. The betrayal. Another loss, 3 years after losing his father. It would break him. But letting him marry her would destroy him worse. I need to see it, I heard myself say. I need to see this house, this family. I need to be absolutely certain before I ruin my son's wedding day. Theo met my eyes in the rearview mirror. Are you sure, ma'am? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I'm sure. My voice came out stronger than I felt. Take me to Maple Street. Now. The drive took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. We left the tree-lined streets of Buckhead and headed toward Midtown, then into an older neighborhood where the houses were smaller, closer together, with chain-link fences and cars parked on the street. This wasn't Tirza's world. At least not the world she'd shown us. Theo drove slowly down Maple Street, past modest homes with front porches and kids' toys scattered across lawns. He pulled over about 50 yards from a small yellow house with white trim. That's it, he said quietly. 1247 Maple Street. I stared at the house. A bicycle lay on its side in the front yard. Window boxes held cheerful geraniums. A welcome mat sat on the front porch. It looked like a home. Lived in. Loved. Real. Nothing like the sleek, modern apartment in Buckhead where Tirza claimed to live. What time is it? I asked. 7:45, ma'am. As if on cue, the front door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a white dress shirt and slacks. He looked tired, worried, like someone carrying a heavy burden. He turned back toward the house and said something. A little girl burst through the doorway. 5 years old, maybe. Blonde curls bouncing, wearing a pink dress with white flowers. She threw her arms around the man's legs. Daddy! Her voice carried across the quiet morning street, high and clear. Do I have to go to Grandma's? Can't I stay home with you and Mommy? The man, Jackson Hayes, I realized, crouched down to her level. Just for today, Emma Bean. Mommy has something important to do. But it's Saturday. We always have pancakes on Saturday. I know, sweetheart. Tomorrow, I promise. Double chocolate chips. Then Tirza appeared in the doorway. My breath caught. She was wearing jeans and an oversized cardigan, her hair loose and unstyled, face free of makeup. She looked younger, softer, completely different from the polished woman who'd sat at our dinner table a dozen times. She looked real. Tirza walked down the steps and knelt beside Emma, pulling her daughter into a hug. Be good for Grandma, okay? And I'll see you tonight. I'll come tuck you in, I promise. You promise, promise? Emma held up her pinky. Promise, promise. Tirza linked her pinky with her daughter's, then kissed the top of her head. Jackson stood, his hand on Tirza's shoulder. They exchanged a look, something heavy and complicated passing between them. Not the look of a happy couple, but of two people sharing a secret, sharing a burden. Are you sure about this? Jackson's voice was low, but I could just barely hear it. Tirza, we could find another way. There is no other way. Tirza's voice was firm. This is the only chance we have. By tonight, Emma will be safe. That's all that matters. Safe? Safe from what? Jackson pulled Tirza close, kissing her forehead. I love you. No matter what happens today, remember that. I love you too. Tirza pulled back, wiping her eyes. I should go. I need to get ready and... She glanced at her watch. I need to be at the church by 10:30. My church. My son's wedding. I watched as Jackson loaded Emma into a car seat in an older model sedan. Watched as Tirza stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Watched as she stood there alone for a long moment, shoulders sagging, looking nothing like a bride on her wedding day. She looked terrified. Then Tirza straightened, went back inside, and closed the door. I sat frozen in Theo's car, mind reeling. This wasn't a simple con. This wasn't a gold digger who'd tricked my son for money. There was something else happening here. Something involving that little girl. something that made both Tirza and Jackson look scared instead of greedy. "Mrs. Brixton?" Theo's voice was gentle. "What do you want to do?" I thought about Lysander, probably putting on his tie right now, nervous and excited. I thought about the 200 guests gathering at the cathedral, expecting a beautiful ceremony. I thought about Tirza's face when she hugged that little girl, the love there, unmistakable and real. And I thought about Alexander's voice in my head. A mother's instinct is never wrong, Letty, but sometimes the right answer isn't the obvious one. "Follow her," I said. "When she leaves, follow her. I need to know where she's going, what she's planning." And then I paused, making a decision that would change everything. "Then I need to talk to Jackson Hayes, before the wedding. I need to understand what's really happening here." "Ma'am, are you sure? Mr. Lysander will hate me for what I'm about to do." My voice cracked. "But I can't let him marry a lie, even if I don't understand the whole truth yet." Theo nodded slowly. "Mr. Alexander would be proud of you. Or he'd tell me I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life." I looked at the yellow house, thinking about the little girl with blonde curls who called Tirza Mommy. Either way, I have to know the truth. All of it. At that moment, Tirza's car pulled out of the driveway. A silver Honda, not the luxury vehicle she'd always driven when visiting us. She drove past without noticing our car, heading toward downtown. "Stay back," I told Theo. "Don't let her see us." As we pulled into traffic behind her, following my son's bride-to-be toward whatever truth awaited, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lysander. "Mom, where are you? Getting nervous here. Can't wait to see you at the church. Love you." I stared at those words. "Love you," and felt my heart break a little. "I love you too, sweetheart," I whispered to the phone. "That's why I'm doing this." Tirza's silver Honda wound through downtown Atlanta, and we followed at a careful distance. Theo was good at this. Probably came from his years as a private investigator before Alexander hired him. He knew when to hang back, when to switch lanes, how to stay invisible. We watched Tirza pull into a parking garage beneath the Peachtree Plaza Hotel. Not one of ours, thank God. I couldn't have handled that additional betrayal. "She's going to get ready there," I said, more to myself than to Theo. "Change into her wedding dress where her husband won't see it." "Looks that way, ma'am." Theo parked across the street where we could watch the entrance. We sat in silence for a moment, the engine idling, morning traffic building around us. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lysander. "Ryan's trying to tie my bow tie and failing miserably. Wish Dad was here to do it. Miss you both." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Alexander had taught Lysander how to tie a bow tie when he was 12, both of them standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Alexander's patient voice explaining each step. "A man should know how to dress himself properly," he'd said. "Shows respect, for himself and everyone around him." What would Alexander do right now? The answer came immediately. He'd want to understand the whole picture before acting. My husband had never been impulsive. He'd built our business by asking questions, by looking beneath the surface, by understanding people's motivations. "Theo," I said suddenly, "take me back to Maple Street. Now." "Ma'am?" "Tirza's here for at least an hour. Hair, makeup, getting dressed. That gives me time to talk to Jackson Hayes before—" I swallowed hard. "Before I decide what to do at the church." Theo met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "You're going to confront him?" "I'm going to ask him why. Why his wife is about to commit bigamy. Why a little girl needs to be safe. Why two people who clearly love each other would orchestrate something like this." I straightened my shoulders. "Because this isn't about greed, Theo. I saw Tirza's face on that porch. That was fear, not ambition." "Yes, ma'am. I saw it too." The drive back to Maple Street took 12 minutes. It was 8:30 now. 2.5 hours until the ceremony. Time was running out, but I needed answers before I destroyed my son's life, or saved it. We pulled up in front of the yellow house. This time I didn't hide in the car. I walked straight up to the front door and knocked. The door opened, and Jackson Hayes stood there in his white shirt, tie loosened, looking exhausted. When he saw me, his face went completely white. "Oh, God," he whispered. "You're her. You're Lysander's mother." I didn't ask how he knew. The resemblance between Lysander and me was strong. Same dark hair, same sharp jawline. Alexander used to joke that our son got all my stubborn features and all his gentle heart. My name is Letitia Brixton, I said, keeping my voice steady. And I think you and I need to have a conversation, Mr. Hayes. Jackson glanced behind me at Theo, who'd gotten out of the car and stood at a respectful distance. Then he looked back at me, and something in his expression crumbled. You know, he said, not a question, a statement of defeat. I know your wife is married to you. I know you have a daughter named Emma. I know that in less than 3 hours, Tirza is planning to marry my son in a cathedral full of people. I paused. What I don't know is why. Jackson closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they were wet. You should come inside. The living room was small but comfortable. Worn couch, coffee table covered in crayon drawings, toys in a basket by the TV. On the mantel sat photographs, Jackson and Tirza on their wedding day, looking young and hopeful. Emma as a newborn in the hospital, so tiny in her mother's arms. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, beach vacations. A whole life, documented and real. Emma's at my mother's house, Jackson said, sinking onto the couch like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Tirza didn't want her here today, didn't want her to see. His voice broke. I remained standing. Mr. Hayes, I need you to tell me everything. And I need the truth. Because right now, I'm deciding whether to call the police or walk into that cathedral and expose your wife in front of 200 people. The only thing stopping me is that I saw Tirza's face this morning, and she didn't look like a woman about to con someone. She looked terrified. Jackson buried his face in his hands. She is terrified. We both are. Of what? Of losing Emma. The room seemed to tilt. What do you mean, losing Emma? And then Jackson Hayes told me everything. Emma had been born premature, 28 weeks, weighing barely 2 pounds. She'd spent 3 months in the NICU, fighting for every breath, every heartbeat. The doctors had saved her life, but the medical bills had destroyed the Hayes family financially. $340,000, Jackson said, his voice hollow. Even with insurance, we owed over $200,000. I was working as an architect. Tirza was teaching kindergarten. We had some savings, but nothing like that. And then the firm I worked for went under during COVID. I couldn't find work for 8 months. They'd tried everything. Banks wouldn't lend to them. Family couldn't help. Jackson's parents were retired on fixed income. Tirza's mother had died years ago. Her father was estranged. They'd sold everything they could, maxed out credit cards, taken second jobs. And then Jackson's friend Marcus had introduced him to Vincent Carter. Marcus said Vincent was an independent lender, helped people when banks wouldn't. The interest rate seemed high, 15%, but we were desperate. Emma needed follow-up care, therapy, medication. We thought we could pay it back once I found work again. But the contract had hidden clauses. Compound interest that recalculated every 6 months. Fees for processing and administration. What started as a $150,000 loan ballooned to $350,000 within 18 months, then to $580,000 by the 3rd year. I got a new job, Jackson said, but it was barely enough to cover our regular expenses, let alone Vincent's payments. We tried to renegotiate. Vincent said no. Then 6 months ago, he changed the terms. Jackson's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. Unknown number. Payment overdue. New arrangement. $600,000 by December 1st, or we collect alternative assets. Your daughter's birth certificate and SSN are valuable. Certain buyers pay well for young girls. I felt bile rise in my throat. He threatened to sell Emma? Not threatened. Promised. Jackson's voice was barely above a whisper. Vincent has connections. He showed us photos of other families who couldn't pay. Their kids. Missing children reports. He said Emma would disappear, and we'd never see her again. My hand covered my mouth. This wasn't about greed. This was about a human trafficking threat against a 5-year-old child. The police? I managed to ask. We tried, but we signed a contract, legally binding. The detective we spoke to said it was a civil matter unless Vincent actually attempted kidnapping, and by then it would be too late. He told us to hire a lawyer, but lawyers cost money we don't have. Jackson looked up at me with hollow eyes. We had no way out, Mrs. Brixton. No way to get that much money. And then Tirza started researching. Tirza had found articles about the Brixton Hotel Group, about Alexander's death 3 years ago. About Lysander taking over operations at 30 years old, young and grieving and vulnerable. She spent 2 months learning everything about your family, Jackson said. Your business dealings, your charitable work, your social circle. She found out about the fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, the same hospital that saved Emma's life. She changed her appearance, created a fake resume, got herself invited, and targeted my son. My voice came out cold. Yes. Jackson didn't flinch from the accusation. The plan was simple. Make Lysander fall in love, marry him. Once she had legal access to the Brixton accounts, transfer $600,000, enough to pay off Vincent and have a small cushion to disappear. Then divorce Lysander quietly after a year, claim incompatibility, walk away. While leaving my son emotionally destroyed and financially betrayed. I know. Jackson's voice cracked. I know how horrible this is. Do you think I don't hate myself every single day? Do you think Tirza doesn't cry herself to sleep knowing what she's doing to an innocent man? He stood, agitation taking over. But what would you do, Mrs. Brixton? If someone threatened to take Lysander, to sell him to monsters, to make him disappear, what wouldn't you do to save him? The question hit like a physical blow. What wouldn't I do to save my son? I thought about the 3 years after Alexander died, when Lysander had been so depressed he barely ate, barely spoke, barely lived. I'd have done anything, to bring him back from that darkness. And these parents were facing something infinitely worse. Did Tirza, I had to ask, did she develop any real feelings for Lysander, or was it all pretense? Jackson was quiet for a long moment. That's the worst part. She did. She does. Tirza comes home crying sometimes, talking about how kind he is, how genuine, how she wishes she'd met him under different circumstances, how she hates herself for what she's doing. He looked at me. It would be easier if she felt nothing, but she's falling in love with him, and she still has to betray him to save our daughter. I walked to the mantel looking at the photographs. Emma's gap-toothed smile, Tirza and Jackson on a beach somewhere, looking happy and normal. A family that should have had a simple, peaceful life, torn apart by medical debt and a predatory lender. Behind me, Jackson spoke again. I know you're going to stop the wedding. I understand. I'm begging you. Please don't press charges until after December 1st. Give us time to figure out. December 1st? I turned. That's tomorrow. Yes. Jackson's voice was barely audible. Vincent's deadline is tomorrow night. If we don't have the money by then. He couldn't finish the sentence. My phone buzzed. A text from Lysander. Mom, seriously, where are you? Getting worried. Church in 2 hours. 2 hours. In 2 hours, my son would stand at an altar, believing he was marrying the love of his life. And I had to decide, destroy the wedding and leave a 5-year-old child vulnerable to a monster? Or let the fraud continue and risk my son's devastation when the truth eventually came out? There had to be another way. Mr. Hayes, I said slowly, an idea forming. What if I told you that neither of those things has to happen? He looked at me, confusion and desperate hope warring on his face. What do you mean? What if we could protect Emma, stop the wedding, and ensure Vincent Carter faces justice? I pulled out my phone. I'm going to make some calls, but first, I need you to answer one question honestly. Anything. If there was another way to save Emma, a way that didn't involve destroying my son, would Tirza take it? Jackson didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat. Mrs. Brixton, we're not criminals. We're just parents who ran out of options. I nodded, my decision crystallizing. Then here's what's going to happen. You and Emma are going to come to the cathedral today. You're going to bring every piece of documentation you have, the loan contract, Vincent's threats, everything. And when Reverend Williams asks if anyone objects to this marriage, I'm going to stand up. But I'm not going to expose Tirza to destroy her. I'm going to expose the truth to save all of us. I don't understand. Tirza's plan was to get money to protect Emma. My plan is to protect Emma without the money, or rather without the fraud. I was already dialing. I'm calling our family attorney and our contact at the FBI. Human trafficking threats cross federal lines. Vincent Carter is going to jail, and your legitimate debt will be handled through legal channels. But the wedding, Lysander, will be hurt, devastated, angry. My voice softened. But he'll understand why, eventually, and that understanding will help him heal in a way that a slow reveal divorce never would. I paused. My son deserves the truth, Mr. Hayes, even when it's painful, especially when it's painful. Jackson stared at me. Why would you help us? After what Tirza tried to do to your family. I looked at Emma's photo on the mantel. Blonde curls, bright smile, completely innocent in all of this. I thought about Lysander at 5 years old, that same uncomplicated joy in his eyes. Because I'm a mother, I said simply. And no parent should have to choose between their child's safety and their morals. Vincent Carter forced that choice. Not you, not Tirza. My phone connected. Robert, it's Letitia Brixton. I need you to conference an Agent Sarah Morrison from the FBI Atlanta field office. We have a situation involving human trafficking threats, loan fraud, and I need both of you at St. Benedict's Cathedral in 90 minutes. I paused. Yes, at my son's wedding. I'll explain everything, but we need to move fast. As I made call after call, lawyer, FBI, even cathedral security, Jackson Hayes sat on his couch and wept. When I finished, I turned back to him. Get Emma from your mother's house. Bring her to the cathedral, but use the side entrance and stay in the anteroom near the sanctuary until I signal you. Can you do that? Yes. His voice was shaky but determined. Mrs. Brixton, I don't know how to— Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Tirza will face legal consequences for the bigamy attempt and fraud. You'll both have to testify against Vincent. Your lives will be disrupted for months. I met his eyes. But Emma will be safe, and in the end, that's all that matters. Jackson nodded. It is. It's all that matters. Theo drove me back downtown toward the cathedral. It was 9:45 now, just over an hour until the ceremony. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Robert confirming the FBI was mobilizing, Agent Morrison explaining they'd had Vincent Carter under investigation for months, but needed witness testimony, cathedral security coordinating with law enforcement for Emma's protection. And through it all, texts from Lysander. Mom, please tell me you're on your way. Starting to panic here. Mom, I finally responded. On my way, sweetheart. Traffic. Be there soon. I love you. Such small lies in service of a larger truth. Mrs. Brixton, Theo said quietly as we drove, Mr. Alexander would be very proud of what you're doing. Or he'd tell me I'm about to break our son's heart in front of 200 people. You're saving him from a bigger heartbreak later. That's what parents do. I looked out the window at Atlanta rolling past, the city where Alexander and I had built our life, where we'd raised Lysander, where we'd buried my husband 3 years ago. Everything was about to change again. My phone rang. Lysander, not a text this time, a call. I answered. Hi, sweetheart. Mom? His voice was tight with nerves and excitement. Where are you? The wedding's in an hour and I just really need you here. My throat constricted. I'm almost there, Lysander. I promise. Are you okay? You sound weird. Just emotional. It's a big day. Yeah. He laughed softly. I'm terrified. Keep thinking about Dad. Wishing he could be here. Wishing he could have met Tirza, given me advice, told me I'm not completely crazy for doing this. I closed my eyes. Your father would want you to be happy, Lysander. Truly happy, with someone who's honest and real. That's what Tirza is. She's the most genuine person I've ever met. Mom, I know you had doubts at first, but— Lysander, I had to stop him. Couldn't listen to him praise her when I knew what was coming. I'll see you soon. I love you. Love you too, Mom. And thank you for accepting her, for giving us your blessing. It means everything. The call ended. Theo glanced at me in the mirror. Mrs. Brixton? I'm fine. I wiped my eyes. Just keep driving. We pulled up to St. Benedict's Cathedral at 10:15. The Gothic spires reached toward blue sky, stone walls that had witnessed countless weddings, baptisms, funerals. Alexander's funeral had been here. Now Lysander's wedding, or what should have been his wedding, would happen in the same sacred space. The parking lot was already filling with guests. I saw familiar faces, business associates, family friends, people who'd known us for decades, all arriving in their finest clothes, expecting a celebration. Agent Morrison met me at the side entrance, a woman in her 40s, professional but kind. Mrs. Brixton, we have units positioned around the perimeter. Vincent Carter was picked up 20 minutes ago trying to enter Cathedral grounds. He's in custody. Relief flooded through me. Emma's safe? Completely. Mr. Hayes and his daughter will be protected throughout. She paused. I have to ask, are you certain you want to do this publicly? We could handle this quietly, stop the ceremony privately. No, my voice was firm. My son needs to understand the whole truth, all at once. He needs to see Emma, meet Jackson, understand why this happened. Otherwise, he'll just feel betrayed without context. Agent Morrison nodded. Courage runs in your family, ma'am. Or foolishness. I'm not sure which yet. I entered the cathedral through the side door. Inside it was beautiful, white roses and lilies everywhere, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, the organ playing softly. Everything perfect for a wedding that would never happen. I needed to see Lysander, just once more before I destroyed his happiness to save him. I found Lysander in the groom's preparation room, a small chamber behind the altar where generations of nervous men had waited before walking down the aisle. He stood in front of a full-length mirror, struggling with his bow tie, just like I'd imagined. Ryan Mitchell stood beside him, trying to help and failing spectacularly. No, dude, over and then through. Wait, that's not right either, Ryan muttered. Dad made this look so easy, Lysander said, frustration and sadness mixing in his voice. Let me. I stepped forward, my hands steady despite everything. Lysander's face lit up when he saw me. Mom, finally! I was starting to think you'd abandoned me. If only you knew how much I wish I could. I took over the bow tie, my fingers remembering the movements Alexander had taught me years ago. Lysander stood still, watching my face in the mirror. You look beautiful, Mom. Dad would love that you're wearing his dress. He picked it for you, I said softly, for your wedding day. He knew this day would come, even if he couldn't be here to see it. Lysander's eyes grew wet. I wish he was here. I keep thinking about what he'd say. Probably some joke about me finally growing up, or advice about marriage that would make me laugh and cry at the same time. I finished the bow tie, my hands lingering on his shoulders. In the mirror, I studied my son's face, 32 years old, so much like Alexander, but with my eyes, my determination. He looked happy, nervous, but genuinely happy. This was the last moment he'd look at me without pain in his eyes. Lysander, I said carefully, you know I love you more than anything in this world, right? Of course, Mom. Where's this coming from? I need you to know that everything I do, every decision I make is to protect you. Even when it doesn't feel that way. Even when... I stopped myself. Couldn't say more without giving everything away. Lysander turned to face me, concern creasing his forehead. Mom, you're scaring me a little. Is something wrong? I just want you to be truly happy, with someone who's honest with you, someone who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway. That's Tirza. His face softened into that expression of absolute certainty that only love or delusion could create. She knows me, Mom. The real me. The guy who still misses his dad, who works too hard because he's afraid of failure, who sometimes wakes up at 3 a.m. worried about everything. And she loves all of it. Does she? Or does she love the access you provide to saving her daughter? But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Then I hope you find every happiness you deserve, I said, and kissed his cheek. Ryan cleared his throat. Hate to break up the moment, but we've got 20 minutes until showtime. Guests are all seated. Lysander took a deep breath. Okay, I can do this. Just walk down an aisle, say some vows, try not to pass out. You'll be perfect, Ryan said, clapping his shoulder. As I turned to leave, Lysander caught my hand. Mom, thank you. For everything. For accepting Tirza, for supporting us, for being here. I know Dad's gone, but having you here makes me feel like he's with us somehow. I squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then I left before he could see me cry. In the hallway, Agent Morrison waited. Mrs. Brixton, Mr. Hayes just arrived with Emma. They're in the west anteroom as requested, and... She paused. The bride arrived 10 minutes ago. She's in the bridal suite. Does she know anything? No, ma'am. As far as she's aware, everything is proceeding as planned. I nodded. Then let's keep it that way. She needs to walk down that aisle believing this is really happening. At 11 a.m. exactly, the organ music swelled into the processional. I took my seat in the front pew, the mother of the groom's traditional place, and watched as the wedding party assembled. The cathedral was magnificent. 200 guests filled the pews, all dressed in their finest, faces turned toward the back in anticipation. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across marble floors. White roses and lilies adorned every surface, their sweet perfume filling the air. It should have been perfect. Ryan walked down the aisle first, taking his place as best man. Then the bridesmaids, friends of Tirza's from her teaching job that may or may not have been real. Each one smiling, graceful, completely unaware of what was coming. Lysander stood at the altar beside Reverend Williams, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. His eyes kept darting to the back of the cathedral, waiting for his bride. Our eyes met across the distance. He smiled at me and I smiled back, both of us trying to be brave for each other. Then the music changed. The bridal march began. Everyone stood. The doors at the back opened and Tirza appeared. She was breathtaking. The wedding dress was simple but elegant. Ivory silk, fitted bodice, flowing skirt. A cathedral-length veil framed her face. She carried a bouquet of white roses and stephanotis. She looked like every bride in every fairy tale, like the beginning of a beautiful story. But I knew it was the end of something else. I watched Tirza's face as she began her walk down the aisle. She was composed, serene, playing her role perfectly. But I saw what others wouldn't. The slight tremor in her hands, the way she gripped the bouquet too tightly, the flash of something in her eyes when she looked at Lysander. Guilt? Love? Both? She passed my pew, and for just a second our eyes met. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise? Wariness. The look of someone who suddenly realizes the hunter has become the hunted. But she kept walking. Tirza reached the altar. Lysander stepped forward to take her hand, his face radiating pure joy. "You're beautiful," he whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "So are you," she whispered back. They turned to face Reverend Williams together, hands clasped, ready to begin. Reverend Williams smiled at the congregation. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join Lysander James Brixton and Tirza Quinn Moore in holy matrimony." Moore, still using her false name, the lie continuing right up until the end. "Marriage is a sacred covenant," the Reverend continued, "built upon love, trust, and honesty. It is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was established by God. Trust and honesty." The words felt like accusations. I glanced toward the west anteroom. Through a small window I could see Agent Morrison standing guard. Behind her, Jackson Hayes held Emma, the little girl's face pressed against her father's shoulder, waiting. My heart pounded so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. The ceremony proceeded. Readings from Scripture. A prayer. Each word felt like walking toward an inevitable cliff. Then Reverend Williams opened his book to the vows section. "Before we continue, I must ask, if any person here knows any reason why Lysander and Tirza should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional moment. The question that was supposed to be rhetorical, a formality, words spoken at every wedding but never actually answered. Until now, I stood. The rustle of my dress echoed in the profound silence. 200 heads turned toward me. Lysander's face went from confused to horrified in the space of a heartbeat. "Mom? I object." My voice came out clear and steady, carrying through the cathedral. Gasps erupted. Whispers exploded across the congregation like wildfire. "What's happening? Did she just— Oh my God!" Tirza's face went white as marble. The bouquet trembled in her hands. "Mrs. Brixton." Reverend Williams looked completely at a loss. In 40 years of performing weddings, this had probably never happened to him. "This is most irregular. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." I stepped into the aisle. "This needs to be said here, now, in front of everyone." Lysander moved toward me, his expression a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. "Mom, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" "No, sweetheart, I've finally found it." I walked toward the altar, each step measured and deliberate. "I'm sorry, Lysander, but I cannot let you marry this woman." "Why not?" His voice cracked. "What could you possibly—" "Because she's already married." The cathedral erupted. Shouts, Gasps. The sound of 200 people reacting simultaneously, voices overlapping in shock and confusion. Tirza stumbled backward, her bouquet falling from her hands. White roses scattered across the marble steps like snow. "That's not true," she said, but her voice was weak, unconvincing even to herself. "It is true. I kept my gaze locked on Lysander, not Tirza. My son deserved to hear this from me. Her real name is Tirza Hayes. She has been legally married to Jackson Hayes for 6 years. They have a 5-year-old daughter named Emma." Lysander looked like I'd physically struck him. No, Mom, that's insane. Tirza, tell her she's wrong." Tirza opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just tears streaming down her face, destroying her carefully applied makeup. "Lysander," I moved closer to him. "I know this is devastating, but you need to hear the whole truth. Not just the betrayal, but why." "Why?" He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "What possible reason could justify this?" That's when I nodded to Agent Morrison. The door to the west anteroom opened, and Jackson Hayes walked into the cathedral, carrying Emma. The little girl looked confused by all the staring faces. She wore a pink dress with flowers on it, the same dress from this morning, and clutched a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her blonde curls caught the light from the stained glass windows. "Daddy," she said in that clear, high voice only children have, "why are all these people looking at us?" Jackson's voice was gentle. "It's okay, Emma Bean. Just stay with Daddy." They walked down the center aisle, every eye following them. The resemblance between Emma and Tirza was unmistakable. Same blonde hair, same delicate features, same blue eyes. When Emma saw Tirza standing at the altar in her wedding dress, her face lit up with pure delight. "Mommy!" She squirmed in Jackson's arms. "Mommy, you look like a princess." The single word, "Mommy," confirmed everything. The cathedral exploded again, louder this time. "Did that child just say, 'Mommy?' What is happening?" Lysander turned to Tirza, his face a landscape of devastation. "Mommy? She called you Mommy." Jackson reached the front of the cathedral and stopped a few feet from the altar. He looked at Lysander with genuine sympathy. "I'm Jackson Hayes. Tirza is my wife. We've been married for 6 years. This is our daughter, Emma. She's 5 years old." "No." Lysander's voice was barely audible. "No, this can't be real. Tirza, tell me this isn't real." Tirza sank to her knees, the white dress pooling around her, sobs shaking her entire body. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Why?" Lysander's anguish filled the cathedral. "Why would you do this to me?" That's when I stepped in. "Because someone threatened to take Emma." Silence fell. I addressed the congregation as much as Lysander. 6 years ago, Emma was born premature. The medical bills destroyed the Hayes family financially. When they couldn't get a bank loan, they borrowed from a man named Vincent Carter, a predatory lender who trapped them with compound interest and hidden fees. 6 months ago, when they still couldn't pay, Vincent threatened to kidnap Emma and sell her to human traffickers. Gasps of horror rippled through the crowd. Tirza didn't target Lysander out of greed, I continued. She did it out of desperation. The plan was to marry him, access our family accounts, transfer enough money to pay off Vincent, and then quietly divorce. It wasn't about wanting our wealth. It was about saving her child's life. Lysander stared at me, then at Tirza, then at Emma in Jackson's arms. So this whole thing, our entire relationship, everything you said, everything we did, I didn't expect to fall in love with you. Tirza looked up at him, tears streaming. That wasn't part of the plan. I was supposed to pretend, to play a role. But you were so kind, so genuine. You made me laugh. You talked about your father with such love that it broke my heart. Her voice cracked. You became real to me, and that made everything so much worse. But you were still going to go through with it, Lysander said flatly. You were still going to marry me, steal from my family, and disappear. To save my daughter. Tirza's voice was anguished. What would you do if someone threatened to take the person you loved most, to hurt them in ways you can't even imagine? What wouldn't you do? Lysander looked at Emma, 5 years old, innocent, clutching her stuffed rabbit, not understanding why all the adults were crying. I don't know, he whispered. Agent Morrison stepped forward, showing her badge. FBI. Vincent Carter was arrested this morning outside this cathedral. He's been under federal investigation for months for loan sharking and human trafficking threats. He'll be going to prison for a very long time. Emma is safe. Jackson's knees buckled with relief. He held his daughter tighter. She's safe? Really safe? Completely. Tirza looked at me, understanding dawning through her tears. You did this? You arranged all of this? I did what I had to do, I said. I couldn't let my son marry a lie, but I also couldn't let a child suffer because her parents were desperate. I paused. However, there are still consequences, Tirza. You attempted bigamy and fraud. You'll face legal charges. But given the circumstances, I suspect the court will be lenient. I don't care. Tirza's voice was hollow. As long as Emma's safe, I don't care what happens to me. Lysander stood frozen, trying to process everything. Finally, he looked at Tirza one last time. Did you ever love me? His voice broke on the question. At all? Or was every moment a lie? Tirza met his eyes. I loved you. That's the truth, Lysander. I loved you, and I hated myself for what I was doing, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But please believe me when I say, if things had been different, if we'd met another way, I would have chosen you. Honestly, chosen you. But you didn't. Lysander's words were simple, final. You chose your daughter, which I understand, but that doesn't make this hurt any less. He turned and walked away from the altar, past the stunned guests, past his mother, out of the cathedral into the bright Atlanta afternoon. Ryan hesitated for just a moment, then ran after him. The cathedral cleared slowly. Guests left in shocked silence, whispering to each other, phones already out to text friends who weren't here to witness this impossible scene. Agent Morrison took Tirza into custody, handcuffs hidden under a lace shawl, dignity preserved as much as possible. Jackson and Emma were escorted out by federal agents for their protection and debriefing. As they passed, Emma looked at me. Are you a queen? She asked seriously. You're dressed like a queen. No, sweetheart, I said softly. Just a mother. My mommy's a princess today, Emma said, then frowned. But why is everyone sad? Princesses are supposed to be happy. Jackson carried her out before she could ask more questions. Reverend Williams approached me, looking shell-shocked. Mrs. Brixton, in all my years, I'm sorry for disrupting your service, Reverend. Don't apologize. You stopped a mockery from happening in God's house. You did the right thing. He paused. Though I suspect your son won't see it that way for quite some time. No, I agreed. He won't. I found Lysander in the parking lot, sitting on a bench, still in his wedding suit. Ryan stood a respectful distance away, keeping watch but giving him space. I sat beside my son. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I loved her, Lysander finally said, his voice raw. I really, truly loved her. I know. And she was just using me the whole time. Not the whole time. I believe she really did fall in love with you, Lysander. That's what made it so complicated. He laughed bitterly. Complicated. My wedding day ended with my bride being arrested for bigamy, and you're calling it complicated. What would you call it? A nightmare. A humiliation. The worst day of my life. He turned to look at me, pain etched in every line of his face. How long have you known? Since this morning. Theo discovered it and told me. I spent the morning investigating, talking to Jackson, arranging protection for Emma, coordinating with the FBI. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? I asked gently. If I'd come to you this morning and said Tirza was married with a child, would you have called off the wedding? Or would you have defended her and married her anyway? Lysander closed his eyes. I would have defended her. I would have thought you were being paranoid or trying to control my life. He opened his eyes. Which means you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, and I hate you for it right now. I know. But I also, his voice broke, I also love you for it, and I don't know how to feel both things at the same time. I took his hand. You don't have to know right now. You just have to feel what you feel, and eventually you'll heal. Did you heal? After Dad died? I learned to live around the pain, I said honestly. I learned that you can survive losing someone you love. And you'll survive this, Lysander. because you're stronger than you know." We sat together as the sun climbed higher, as the last guests trickled away, as the cathedral staff began the somber task of clearing away flowers meant for a wedding that never happened. Finally, Lysander stood. "I need some time. I don't know what I need." "Take all the time you want. I'll be here when you're ready." He nodded and walked toward his car, Ryan following. Theo appeared beside me. "Well done, Mrs. Brixton." "It doesn't feel like I did well. It feels like I broke my son's heart." "You broke it to save it," Theo said quietly. "Mr. Alexander would be proud." 6 months later, winter sunlight streamed through the windows of my office at Brixton Hotel Group headquarters. I sat at my desk, reviewing the quarterly reports, when Lysander walked in carrying coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting a cup in front of me. I looked up, studying my son. He looked better, not healed exactly, but healthier. He'd been seeing Dr. Sarah Bennett, a trauma therapist, twice a week since the wedding. He'd thrown himself into work, expanding our hotel operations into 2 new markets. He'd started running again, something he hadn't done since Alexander died. "How are you?" I asked, the question I asked every day, still waiting for the honest answer. "Getting there," he said. "Dr. Bennett says I'm making progress, learning to trust my instincts again, not blaming myself for what happened." "That's good." He sat down across from me. "I got a letter from Tirza." My hand stilled on my coffee cup. "Do you want to talk about it?" "She's serving 18 months. Reduced sentence because of the circumstances. The threats against Emma, Vincent's arrest, her cooperation with the FBI." Lysander looked out the window. "She says she's sorry. Says she thinks about me every day. Says she hopes I find someone who deserves me. How does that make you feel?" "I don't know. I'm not angry anymore, which surprised me. I'm just sad. Sad for what could have been if things were different. Sad for Emma, who lost her mother for over a year. Sad for Jackson, who's raising a daughter alone." He paused. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." "About what?" "I've been thinking. Emma's in kindergarten now. Jackson's working, but money's tight. And I thought," he hesitated, "what if we set up a trust fund for Emma's education, college fund, whatever she needs?" I felt my eyes well up. "Lysander, it's not her fault her mother made desperate choices. And maybe if I can help her have a better life, something good comes out of all this." I stood and pulled my son into a hug. "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become. I learned from the best." He hugged me back. "You showed me that doing the right thing doesn't always mean seeking revenge. Sometimes it means showing mercy, even when you've been hurt." My phone rang. Theo, with an update on Jackson and Emma. They were doing well. Jackson had a steady job at an architecture firm. Emma was thriving in school. The house on Maple Street was paid off. We'd handled the legitimate portion of their medical debt quietly through our family foundation. After I hung up, Lysander smiled slightly. "You're still protecting them." "I'm protecting a child who deserves a chance at a normal life, just like I protected you." "I know." He picked up the quarterly reports. "So, about the expansion into Charleston." We worked together for the rest of the afternoon, mother and son, business partners, survivors of a day that had changed everything. On my desk, Alexander's photograph smiled at us, husband and father, gone but never forgotten. "We raised him right, Alexander," I whispered when Lysander left for a meeting. And somewhere in that empty office I felt my husband's presence, proud and loving, agreeing.